Okay. Welcome and good evening to the Virtual College Exploration for all Virginia students, sponsored by the Virginia Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admission Counselors and StriveScan. Thanks for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started, and as you guys are all filing in, this presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at the same website, strivescan.com/Virginia. And this is just one of many different sessions happening. So please be sure to check out the full schedule at strivescan.com/Virginia. As a heads up, your camera and microphone are muted, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type your questions to the presenters, and they will answer those as they get to them. I'd like to turn it over to our presenters now.
All right, good evening. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited to be with you and do our presentation on College Admissions 101. So tonight we will talk about some of the basics of the application process, different components that schools look at, and give you advice on how to best be prepared to apply for college in either this year or next year, whenever it's your time to apply for college.
Did the screen change there, Amanda?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So wanting to go ahead and introduce ourselves this evening. My name is Sarah Limberg. I am the Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Mary Washington, which is located in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
I am Christine Perrault, Assistant Director of Admissions at St. John's University in New York City.
And my name is Amanda Walk, and I'm a Regional Admissions Counselor for the University of Tennessee, which is located in Knoxville, Tennessee. All right, the first thing that we cannot emphasize enough is that every school is very, very different. So we're going to talk about a lot of different parts of the application process tonight. It may seem overwhelming, but chances are every school is not going to look at everything that we are talking about. We just want to familiarize you with different terms, different things that you might need to know, and help you best be prepared to apply to college. Some schools may just look at your academics, and some schools may look at a variety of these different factors that we're going to talk about tonight. But the important thing is to know is that every school is very different. And a lot of times when you ask questions in college admissions, the answer is going to be, it depends, because it really depends on each institution. So for you, the most important thing is to know what each school is looking for and what areas they emphasize when they're making decisions. Are they looking predominantly at your academics? Are they heavily considering letters of recommendation? Or are they looking at your essays a lot? So every school is going to be different. Make sure to reach out to your admissions counselor to ask them what they're looking for. We'll usually be very transparent in the things that we're considering in our review process and tell you what things to focus on and maybe some things that aren't quite so important. So I think one thing that you'll find as you start applying to colleges is that we are very different. We have very different application processes, very different dates and deadlines. Sometimes we have one date for admissions, another date for scholarships, another date for honors. So I think maybe sometimes we try to confuse you. We don't mean to, but it's really important that you stay organized. Keep a list of all the schools you want to apply to. Keep a calendar of important dates. Make sure you don't want to miss an opportunity to get a scholarship just because you didn't apply in time. So make sure that you're staying as organized as possible, have everything written in one place so that you don't miss anything important and are as successful as you can be throughout the application process.
Let me unmute myself. So first and foremost, academics. When applying, schools are looking at your academics first and foremost. Your high school record, you're looking at grades, rigor of curriculum, strength of the high school, grade trends. And when we talk about grade trends, we're talking about, is there an upward trend or is there a downward trend? Now, you don't necessarily want to aim for an upward trend or downward trend. You really want to excel all 4 years. But if by some circumstance, let's say freshman year, something happened and you didn't get the best of grades, you can make that up by doing better your sophomore year, junior year, and also the beginning of your senior year. Actually, you probably want to do you want to do well all 4 years. But if something happens, you can always put that down on your I am so sorry. You could always add that you could always put what exactly transpired in the additional information on your application. You want to challenge yourself appropriately. You want to pick classes that challenge you, AP classes, but you want to do well at the same time. You don't want to pick AP classes and not do well. SAT, ACT scores. High scores don't make up for bad grades. We like to see grades and test scores that are consistent. Understand testing policies. You know, with COVID, you have a lot more schools going test optional. You want to probably know the difference between test optional, test blind, and test choice. Test optional, you have the option whether or not you would submit your SAT scores or not. Now, that's when you would want to have a discussion with your counselor regarding should you or should you not submit your test scores. I know at St. John's in the past, there have been students that probably would have been accepted or probably would have received a higher scholarship if they did not submit their test scores. So just because you took the SATs or ACTs does not mean that you should submit them. If they don't reflect your grades, then maybe you should think twice about submitting them. So let's say you have a low GPA, a lower GPA, but have high test scores, you probably would want to submit those test scores. But let's say you have a high GPA, but your SAT scores aren't all that great, then I would think twice. Test blind schools are schools that are not even looking at your SATs or ACTs, and test choice schools are schools that you can choose whether you can substitute the test for, like let's say an AP test, a subject test for the whole SAT or ACTs. Do not slack off your senior year with grades or rigor of your schedule. When you're applying on your common application, you do list the classes that you're taking. So we will know exactly what classes you're taking your senior year. And at the end of the year, we do get your final transcript. And there have been instances where students have been rescinded because they haven't kept up with their schoolwork. So academics.
All right, guys. So I want to touch a little bit on your letters of recommendation throughout the admissions process. So one of the things to think about is that some schools are going to require a certain number of letters of recommendation. Others may encourage that letter of recommendation, and other schools probably don't want it at all. In this COVID world that we're living in, not wanting a letter of recommendation is going to probably be a little less not out there for as many colleges this year, right? Because they're going to want those letters of recommendation to pair with your curriculums and with your GPAs, given that a lot of our schools, as Christine mentioned, have gone test optional or test choice in the COVID world that we're living in right now, knowing that you all don't typically have access to sit for an SAT or ACT, or you don't want to put yourself in a high risk situation in testing as well. So when it comes to letters of recommendation, there are a couple of things that you need to be thinking about. First and foremost, who is going to write these letters of recommendation for you? At many of these schools, it will vary as to who we really want the letters of recommendation from or encourage them from, but always there should be a counselor letter of recommendation and a teacher letter of recommendation. Those are going to be two important ones for you. Others are going to look for maybe a mentor outside of the classroom. It really is going to be school dependent. Go with the guidance of the college or university that you are applying to when it comes to who they want to hear from. But one of those recommenders should really be able to speak to you in the classroom and how you are in the classroom. And that's really what we want to know, because we want to know how you will do academically here, and the letters of recommendation can show us that determination. If a college is asking for 1 to 3 letters of recommendation, but allows you to submit more, that's okay too. But don't submit 8, 9, or 10. For those of us that are full read college institutions, which many of us are, it becomes a little redundant. So narrow down that list of 8 or 9, bring it to 1 to 3 like the school is encouraging. Something to think about when you're asking the various people in your life for these letter of recommendations is do not ask them 24 hours before your application for admission is due at the respective institution that you're applying to. Make sure that you are getting and giving them plenty of time to write you a good letter of recommendation, right? So you want to give, at minimum, I would say 4 to 6 weeks of lead time. Some school counselors are going to have very specific timelines of when you need to be asking for things, but the more time you give a recommender, the better. And the better they will be able to write a letter that is very personal to you and to who you are as a person and what you can contribute to our universities. We also, if you are using that community member, that coach, that mentor that's outside the school, we don't know if they're an important person in your community. So it's more important to get someone who is going to write about you as opposed to having a letter from the mayor, right? Unless the mayor knows you really, really well, that letter should be for someone that can write about you very specifically. And as our advice says at the bottom, ask early in the year, make sure that teacher or counselor can write a good letter of recommendation for you. You want folks that are going to spotlight you in your best light as you're moving through this process. Amanda, you're muted.
Got it. Next, we are going to talk about essays. I think that this is sometimes the scariest part for students because this is the only thing you have complete control over. But maybe reframe that and think about it in that this really is the only thing that you have control over. You can tell us whatever you want to tell us. You can write about whatever you want to write about and really let us get to know you. We are looking for not just students to sit in our classrooms, but also members of our community. So this is really your chance to shine and let us know why you would be a good member of our community. I think one thing to keep in mind is that it is a very human process. So there is no right or wrong topic. For example, at my school, we have 2 readers. Sometimes I read an essay and I think it's amazing. And I'll say something to the person that reads behind me like, hey, look out for this essay. It's really good. And then he'll read it and be like, did we read the same essay? That was not my favorite essay at all. So that being said, there is no right or wrong thing to write about because we're all different. We all have different interests. There's different things that we might enjoy. You know, for example, one of my colleagues loves dogs and she loves essays about dogs and she thinks that they are the best thing ever. I'm a cat person, so I like cat essays. So again, there's no right or wrong, so don't stress when you're picking your topic. 2 rules that I kind of like to use when you're thinking about what your topic might be. The first one, I call it the 80-20 rule. So the 80-20 rule is 80% of your essay should be about you and 20% should be about context or setting up the situation or, you know, telling us maybe about an organization that you were in. If you feel like you have to take more than 20% of the essay to talk about something other than yourself, then perhaps it's not the best topic because again, this is where you really get to shine. My other rule is, I call it the best friend rule. You never want to write an essay that you could take your essay and put somebody else's name on it, say your best friend, and it makes sense. So if the essay seems kind of generic or that it would work for somebody else, then it maybe isn't creative or unique enough. So I definitely recommend reading it back to yourself and thinking, hey, is there enough identifying information about me? Is this unique enough to me to know whether or not it's a good topic? But again, no right or wrong, don't stress. I feel like I can't say that enough because I feel like students really feel like there is a magical topic that they could write about or one that we like more than others. It really depends on who reads your application, and that's going to be different at every school. And sometimes more than one person at a school is going to read your essay. My next piece of advice is be sure to read the prompts and follow directions. I can't tell you how often I read essays from students who either don't answer the prompt at all, or they are so loosely relating their essay to the prompt that they're not answering it. So we ask you specific things for specific reasons. So make sure that you're reading the prompts and following the directions. You know, kind of another piece of advice there is you never want to use another school's name in your essay. So say you submit a Common App essay and you put another school in it, every single school is going to get that. So read the prompts, make sure you're putting the right thing. I read an essay last year. It was her Common App essay, and the whole essay was about how all she wanted to do was go to JMU. She never wanted to leave the state of Virginia, but yet she applied to my school, which is clearly not JMU or in the state of Virginia. So just make sure that you're following those prompts. Also make sure to use your own voice and don't over edit. Something I see students do a lot with essays is they'll have mom look at it, they'll have a counselor look at it, a teacher, maybe a friend or somebody else. And by the time an essay has been edited that much, it really doesn't sound like it's you anymore. Believe it or not, we can tell when an essay was written by a student or a parent. In fact, that just happened in my group chat with my colleagues today. It was clear that the essay was not written by a student. So you want to make sure that your essay is in your own voice and isn't edited by so many people that it loses the value that you put in initially. Also, don't wait to write your essay at the last minute. These are things that you want to work on for maybe weeks at a time. You know, write a draft, work on it, put it away for a couple of days and work on it again. You'll really kind of see it evolve. And I think that that's going to be the best for you to put your best foot forward for your essay. And know that there isn't just one essay for every school. Granted, some schools might not have any essays at all. Some may only have one, but some may have a couple of supplements. So if you're waiting till the last minute to do your application or the last minute to write your essay, you may find that you have a couple more essays or supplements that you need to write. So make sure you're looking, seeing what those essays are. For those of you that are juniors, usually the Common App comes out with their essay prompts in like February, usually sometime in the winter. So you could even start working on it in your junior year, thinking about what you want to write about. So my best advice is be original. You know, find a different way to say the same things that everybody else is telling us. Not everybody has faced a huge challenge or cured cancer or done something amazing. Sometimes the best essays are ones that are about really simple things like making cupcakes or riding a bike. Put yourself in our shoes and think about us reading essays all day, every day. A lot of essays start to look the same. So think about if you were reading essays all day, every day, would this essay stand out? So again, no right or wrong topic, but be as original as possible with your topic if you really want to stand out.
Christine, you're muted.
I just didn't want you guys to hear the dog barking outside. But okay, extracurricular activities, that's everything that is not a school requirement, something that shows your personality. The GPA and SAT do not tell us the whole story. When picking an extracurricular activity, you want to choose quality over quantity. You know, we would like to see consistency. We don't want to necessarily see like 5 new clubs every year. Use meaningful use of your free time. Always a plus when the activity lines up with your intended major. So if you're thinking of majoring in journalism, being in the school newspaper, if you're thinking government and politics, international relations, maybe you should join Model UN. If you're thinking about medical school, volunteering at a hospital is something that will look good on your resume or your extracurricular CV. Activities are not important at every school. Some schools may not even consider them. So that goes into what Amanda started off by saying, each school is different. So you do want to make sure as to before, you know, when you're applying as to what schools the extracurricular activities would count and which schools, but it won't necessarily. Getting involved, also doing extracurricular activities is a great way to develop real world life skills. And you know what colleges want to see, they want to see you passionate about something, and that is reflected on the type of extracurricular activities that you pick. So when we talk about quality, we're talking about clubs such as, let's say, student government, the student newspaper, debate team, volunteering. Even a job is an extracurricular activity. We understand that some students might not have enough time to, let's say, join 2 or 3 clubs, but if they show that they're working, because there is a portion on the application that you can note that is considered extracurricular activity. Do what you love, not what you think admissions counselors want to see. You know, we want to see your passion. Don't put activities ahead of your academics.
Okay, so I've got an interesting slide on demonstrated interest and fit. So Amanda and I will be tag teaming on this one. With demonstrated interest, you may be thinking to yourself, this is a little bit more difficult to do in our COVID world as opposed to what would be a regular time, right? So think about how you might be able to demonstrate interest with a university. Some colleges and universities do look at demonstrated interest. Mary Washington is one of them. We want you to connect with us, your admissions counselors, by attending a virtual information session or a virtual open house right now. You can contact us via email or text message. We love to hear from our students. We love to connect with you. We're a smaller institution, so that is very much a part of our process. And demonstrated interest typically is something that you'll see at smaller to medium-sized schools in the application process. So what are the things that we track? We look at visits to campus, whether in person or virtual right now, open house events, whether you meet us regionally, potentially at a college fair or a panel like this. This is demonstrating interest in our institutions as well, or going to one of our virtual college fairs or your high school visits. I know sometimes it can be hard to do that right now, knowing that you're in front of a screen day in and day out, but attending those virtual high school visits will give you an opportunity to potentially meet even one-on-one with the admissions counselors at the colleges that you're interested in, because we've noticed that attendance at those are a little low. So that's a great opportunity to get some face time, even virtually, with your admissions counselor. Read your email. Sometimes we'll text you if you opt in for text messaging. If that's your preferred way to communicate, tell your admissions counselor that. We'll gladly give you a text message as opposed to giving you a call. Just let us know. Or then you're thinking about how we might use this in the application process. Well, we really want to see students that want to be at our institutions and are really invested in what we are offering and what we can provide you, not only academically, but also as a social and community experience, bringing you in and being a part of our family. So that's really what we're looking for with demonstrated interest. And I'm going to have Amanda talk a little bit more about FIT.
All right, awesome. I saw that we had a question. Somebody asked when they're researching colleges, how do I know what to look for? So hopefully that this kind of answers that question. You know, it's not just about whether or not it's the right college for you, but whether or not you're going to be the right fit for us. So kind of an acronym that I like to use is SLAM, which that stands for size, location, academics, and money. So when you're considering colleges, a lot of times size is going to be the most important thing. Do you want a smaller school where it's going to be a more intimate setting where you're going to recognize like everybody on campus? Or do you want a larger school like Tennessee where we have, you know, almost 25,000 students? So that might be too overwhelming for some students. So consider the size of the institution. Consider how big class sizes are. Look and see what the faculty to student ratio is. Look to see what the average class size is. Do you learn better in a smaller environment or do you learn better in a larger environment? Or does it not matter? So size is definitely something that's very important. Location is also important. Do you want to be in a small college town? Do you want to be in a more rural setting? Do you want to be in a more urban setting? Definitely check out the location. One piece of advice that I didn't normally give before COVID, but now since there's so many restrictions on traveling and which states you can go to and do you want to get on an airplane, you know, maybe when it comes to location, take some time to look at some schools that are maybe within driving distance of you. You know, do you like the way that a school in a smaller town feels? Or do you actually like the way that it feels to be in a bigger city? Usually I say visit the campuses, and I think if you have the ability to visit campuses, definitely check them out in person. But kind of with the restrictions we have now, checking out the location and just getting a sense of whether you like that feeling. You know, you might get to a small college town and think that's what you always wanted, and then realize that there's nothing around. That is not what makes you happy. You want to be around things. You want to be close to a bigger city. So definitely check the location and kind of narrow it down based on what you want. Of course, with all these things, it's fine to apply to a variety of schools. I think this year with COVID as well, you may find that you are applying to more schools than you normally would because you're not going to be able to check them out until after the fact. Academics, I think, is a huge piece of it. Obviously, you want to look at schools that have the major that you're considering, but also don't rule out schools that maybe don't have the major that you're considering, or look and see if there's another path that you could take to get to where you want to be. For example, my school doesn't have athletic training, and students always ask me if we have it. We don't have athletic training, but we do have kinesiology, which is just as good of a major to do as athletic training. So there's lots of instances, you know, students sometimes want pre-med. Well, you can pretty much do anything for pre-med. You can do biology, you can do chemistry, you can really do anything. So don't limit schools that don't have your major, but do kind of look and, you know, figure out whether they have something that you might be interested in. Also look and see what the support services they have are for students that are undeclared. Maybe you don't know what you want to major in. Maybe you go to a liberal arts institution where everybody starts out in a general track and you don't have to start in your major. You know, what are the career services? Are they going to help you figure out what you want to major in? Are they going to help you get jobs when you graduate? Also look at the academic support services. You know, do they offer tutoring? What kind of support systems are there for you? If you have a learning difference, are the schools going to accommodate your learning differences? And I think another thing to look at too is look at the academic profile of the schools that you're thinking of and assess whether or not that's a good fit for you. Do you meet their admissions requirements? You know, you can't apply to all Ivy League schools if, you know, maybe your academics aren't that strong, right? So apply to schools that are, maybe we would call them likely schools. I think in the past, you maybe have heard that referred to as a safety school, but we don't really like that term. Apply to schools that are gonna be likely for you to be admitted to. Also apply to some that are maybe a reach. You know, maybe it's gonna be harder to get in. And I think hopefully you'll see throughout this presentation that there is no like golden ticket that's going to get you into any university. So it is a very human process, especially now with so many schools being test optional. Last thing is money. Can you afford the colleges that you're looking at? Have a conversation with your parents to talk about how much money they have for you for college. Don't rule out schools just based on the sticker price. Most of us offer scholarships, different incentives. There's some schools that meet 100% of your needs. So make sure you're looking at a school, whether you can afford it and what the scholarship opportunities are when you are deciding to apply. I'll throw out your advice there, Sarah, on demonstrated interest, but find out which schools track interest so that you can use your time most efficiently. I used to work for an institution, you could visit campus 20 times and we didn't keep track of that, right? So you wouldn't want to go visit a school a bunch of times just to show your interest if that school's not looking at interest in the first place. So know which schools track interest, but know that we're always happy to hear from you, and we're more likely to advocate for you if we know who you are, if it comes down to the end of the admissions process. And you know, maybe there's a few spots left. If we know you, it's going to be better for you than if we don't know you at all, even if we don't officially track interest.
All right, I have the next slide about interviews. Interviews, you'll find them at some places, you won't find them at others. There are two different types of interviews out there. You'll have evaluative interviews versus informal informational interviews. University of Mary Washington is one of those institutions that provides an opportunity for students to interview one-on-one. An easy way to find out if a college offers an interview process is if you go onto their admissions website. They will clearly tell you. There are a number of different people that you could be interviewing with as part of that process. It could be an admissions counselor like myself. It could be an alumni. It could be a professor or faculty member. So there are a number of different folks that could be interviewing you. You want to know if it's information that's going to be added to your application for admission. If there is an option to interview, go ahead and do it. It gives that personal sense in the application process. It makes you more human. It gives us additional information opposed to just looking at GPA and curriculum and test scores. If you have the ability to send them in, it really gives you an opportunity to boast about yourself, which is extremely important. The college admissions process is one of those times in life where you get to brag about yourself all throughout that application, and it's an appropriate time to be able to do that. So go ahead and boast about yourself through this process, because you want to show the universities who you truly are. Interviews, if it's an option, I always encourage you to do it. That is going to be huge. It may put you into a running for an additional scholarship, and typically these interviews are somewhere between 20 45 minutes, depending on the school and the different types of questions that they're going to be asking you for. As you're preparing for that interview, do the research on your own. Be the person that takes that step, and if you can't find information about interviews on the institution's website, go ahead and give the admissions office or your admissions counselor a call and say, is an interview an opportunity? If it is, set up that interview time yourself. We know mom and dad like to get involved in this process too, but you need to be taking these steps by setting up your visits, whether virtually or in person, and contacting your admissions counselor. And the interview is another point in time where you can set this up on yourself. be prepared. For a virtual interview, we definitely suggest that you arrive a little bit early, maybe 3 to 5 minutes early from that start time. If it's an on-campus interview, which given restrictions right now may or may not be happening at different institutions, you want to be probably about 5 to 10 minutes early, making sure that you know where to park, where the building is that you're going to, as well. Those are going to be important factors, and give yourself enough time. If something happens, if you have a family emergency or you get called into work and you can't make your virtual interview, send them a message. Don't just not show up. That's not going to look good on you in this interview process. Same goes for a campus interview. If you're having the opportunity to do that, if there is traffic, call and let the school know that you're going to be running behind, as opposed to just showing up 5 to 10 minutes late. It's the responsible thing to do, and is going to look good to that individual that you are interviewing with, because we have set aside certain blocks of time for these. Interviews is another way to show a great amount of demonstrated interest. So please go ahead and do that. Our piece of advice: research schools beforehand, be educated on basic information about the school, and ask good questions. So while we will be interviewing you, you will also have the opportunity to ask us different questions. And for example, if you come to me and you ask me a question about zoology, that is not something Mary Washington offers, and I know that you haven't really done your research on our institution, right? So making sure that you know about that institution. You don't have to know everything, but you need to know general things. Do they have the major that I'm interested in? If I'm looking for a specific extracurricular activity, have I been able to find information on that? And reference that you've done some different research. It always impresses the person interviewing you if you are able to share that with them. Dress nicely, please. Even if it's a virtual interview, from the waist up, you should be dressed nicely, and make eye contact. Zoom does make that a little more difficult depending upon where your camera is, and where you're facing when you're doing that interview. And I know sometimes it can be distracting too, to see yourself currently as a mirror back and forth. It's throwing me right now a little bit, I'll even admit that. But making sure that you are dressed appropriately, you're sitting up straight, shoulders back, you're not slouching down in your chair, right? You want to look engaged with the individual that you are interviewing with, and those are just some good tips for you.
Other factors. So in-state versus out-of-state, something to take into consideration is when applying to an out-of-state, let's say state school, how that state views out-of-state students. So I know some universities will, out-of-state students the criteria tends to be a little bit higher. Is that the case for you, Amanda, at Tennessee?
It is not at Tennessee, but my previous institution, it was much more competitive to get in out of state.
Okay, so definitely something that she should look into. Legacy versus non-legacy. Legacy means maybe your parent, your grandparent, a sibling went to that institution. It can have a factor in you getting admitted, as well as scholarships, because I know at St. John's, we do offer scholarships for students who are legacy students. Choice of major can contribute to the admissions process. There's some majors can be a little bit more difficult to get into than other majors. I know at St. John's, our Doctor of Pharmacy program, the criteria, and it's a little bit more competitive. But then let's say there's certain majors like not such a popular major might give you a little bit of an edge, as opposed to psychology at a school when you have maybe 500 students applying to psychology, but maybe 5 students applying to, let's say, meteorology, and that might have a factor in you getting accepted. Diversity, and when we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about, color and culture, but we're also talking about demographics. We're talking about religion, socioeconomic status, which will bring me to first generation college student. If you're the first student to go to college in your family, that can have a factor in the application when we're reading your application. And financial need status, need blind versus need aware. Need blind is when the university is not taking into consideration whether or not you will need financial aid. But just FYI, just because a school is need blind does not necessarily mean that they'll meet your 100% need. So things to consider of other factors.
And when it comes to need, I just want to add in there real quick, 'cause in case folks haven't gone through like a financial aid piece yet. Need is really what is determined with the FAFSA form. And from the FAFSA form, you'll get an expected family contribution, or EFC, as we sometimes like to call it. And then that EFC, let's say that's $5,000. If the cost of the attendance of the college or university that you're applying to is a total of $25,000 a year with everything included, your EFC is $5,000. So what the government believes that you can contribute as a family to your education, you subtract that from the $25,000 sticker price, your need is $20,000. So that's what we mean when we're saying need. In colleges and universities, some won't look at what your financial need is in the application process, and others will. So, and they will also be able, your admissions counselor at those institutions will be able to tell you that too.
All right, additional advice. So just a few things that we want to bring up. Differentiate yourself. Find creative ways to tell us the same thing that everyone else is telling us. We hear a lot of, I'm a leader, I'm this, I'm that. Just find something different. Find a way to keep us engaged when we're reading your application. And then also be independent. You're going to be in college next year on your own. So don't rely on your parents to do everything for you. Be in control of the conversation. We want to hear what you have to say. Fill out your own application. I can't tell you how many applications I read where it's the parent's name in the place where the student's name should be because the parent forgot while they were filling it out for you. You'll be on your own next year. Let us know you're up for the challenge. I often talk to way more parents than I do students, and those students that engage with me are really the ones that stand out and that I'm more likely to remember again and advocate for when it comes to it. Sarah, are you want me to do my advice?
Oh, yep. I'm sorry. Yep. I'm sorry. Your piece of advice. I jumped a little early just thinking essence of time, but we are, go ahead and do your piece of advice.
My advice is don't stress. I know we've talked about a lot of things and it's really overwhelming. You will end up where you're supposed to be. And if you don't, you can always transfer. And I think people don't talk about that. So try to take a deep breath and not worry too much about everything we've said. I know it's been overwhelming, but you're going to be okay.
Christine, you want to go next?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm listening to, there's a lot of commotion going outside right now. I'm sorry. My advice is I would say, take a deep breath, similar to you, Amanda. And that's the advice that I actually gave my nephew, that you will wind up at his place, Don't stress about it. Use the resources available to you. Use your counselor. Really reach out to the college, the college reps. Definitely you want to, whatever question you might have regarding the process, you could definitely reach out to us and ask us. My advice.
And my advice is be prepared. Prepare yourself. Make that checklist. Make sure you are organized and know what the different filing dates are and what the different requirements are for each of the different colleges, like which pieces of additional information they are going to want from you in the application process. We did get quite a few questions in the chat here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump to our questions slide. We've got a few ones here, so I'm going to go ahead and start. If Christine, you want to unmute too. The first question we have is, would it be a bad idea to write a few essays and keep them in like a stockpile? So have like a few stockpiled essays.
It can't hurt. You never know what questions you're gonna have and when they might work. I always tell students you wanna minimize the amount of work that you have to do. So if you have an essay that'll work for more than one school or more than one question, go for it. I saw another question, so they kind of go together, is can we explain what supplements are? So supplements are gonna be those additional questions or additional essay questions that schools have. Often they're gonna be, like why Tennessee? Why do you want to apply to Tennessee? Or why Mary Washington? Or why St. John's? Big piece of advice there is make sure, like my best friend advice that I said with the essays, you never want to be able to pick up the question and put it for somewhere else. So if somebody was applying to Tennessee and they said, I want to go to your school because the football games look fun and there's a lot of school spirit, that could work for any number of schools. But supplements are just extra questions that schools ask. So again, the stockpile can be good to help answer some of those supplement questions. Sometimes they're kind of wacky questions that are off the wall, and sometimes they're just so we can get to know you better. But supplements are going to be additional questions that we have in addition to the main essays that we ask you to write.
Great, awesome. Another one we had, when should you start showing interest in colleges themselves? If you are a high school junior, you know, really starting in the spring of your spring of your junior year is not too early. Really getting invested, going to a spring open house, whether it be in person or virtual, those opportunities will be available to you. But definitely making sure that spring is when you really start that college search process, and having that long list of schools that you might be looking at. And spring and summer is that time to narrow down those different choices. But if you already have a short list in your junior year, go ahead and start attending their different events and getting invested. Find out who your admissions counselor is at that institution. Make those connections. Junior year is not too early to be doing that.
Not at all. Junior year, definitely.
All right, we had another one. How do you know if schools track interest? So this goes back to our demonstrated interest. Colleges that track demonstrated interest very much tell you. Usually it's on their admissions criteria or what they're looking at when they're reviewing an application for admission. So when a college and university talks to you about how they review applications, you'll often hear the term holistic review. And in that, it'll tell you, okay, they're going to look at your curriculum, your GPA, testing if you provide it, or they may be test optional or test choice. They want to see your essay and your extracurricular activities. Demonstrated interest is usually amongst that list of what they're telling you that they're using when they're reviewing your application for admission.
And FYI, I know you talked about reading emails. There are universities that are aware whether or not you read their email, and that's another way they track their interest. So if we see that you have not opened any of our emails, it shows us that you're not necessarily as interested in us as you claim to be on your application. So universities do know when you've read your emails. So.
And another thing is too, and we see it, so a little tip of advice, we know that you guys get tons of emails. We definitely encourage you to set up a separate email account that is for your college emails, especially right now when your high schools are really communicating with you through that high school email. Set up that third-party Gmail account. Make sure it's appropriate. As well, think about like first initial, last name, or some variation of that. Blonde hair babe probably isn't the best idea for an email address, right? So making sure that you're using something that's appropriate, but have that dedicated email address so that all of your college stuff isn't getting mixed in with your high school stuff, because right now your high schools are using email probably as their primary form of communication with you. And you may also lose access to that high school email address in the summer before you enroll at the college or university. And summer is an important time for us to be able to be communicating with you. So making sure that you are able to do that. We did get a question about our pivot on our PowerPoint. Yes. I saw that. So we will address that for you. A little pivot. Christine, do you want to mention that? We've got about 2 minutes left.
You know, with the age of COVID, everything is fluid, things are changing. Just be ready to pivot, turn around, and go a different direction. That's what pivot.
So we know that you guys have had to go through quite a few changes, and your seniors aren't looking exactly how you expected them to look. But just know that, you know, things are changing day to day. And just be ready to try and roll with it as best as you can, and pivot. And I hope that all of you one day will watch Friends, because it's excellent. I'll go back to that question slide. All right, what else do we have in that questions? Because we've gotten quite a few. Let's see here.
One of them is about.
We have our email addresses too. You can always reach out to us, you know, outside of this.
But how long, about the length of the essay? The Common App essay has a max of 650 words. Most colleges are going to tell you what the max is if they have one, but it is typically about 650 words, most commonly.
Would you suggest writing a couple of questions you have in case the college does an interview? Most definitely, yes.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. All right, and our last question here, is it okay as a high school junior to email an admissions and ask them to review your transcripts and leadership resume to offer some feedback and suggestions? And as we're answering that question, I know we're running quite out of time. So ladies, I'll let you take that while I stop the screen share.
So I think it's tough because by your junior year, you've pretty much done everything that you're going to do. You can't really add anything much additional to your resume for what you're applying. So it's always good to connect with admissions counselors. We're happy to hear from you. May not make a difference in your process, but again, we're always happy to work with you and answer any questions and learn more about you.
But that's something too you should also be talking to your college counselor about, your school counselor.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll let them do the wrap up, but we really appreciate it. Please reach out if you guys need anything else. And we hope this was helpful and you learned a lot tonight.
Fabulous. So with that, we would like to thank everybody for joining. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of the many sessions being hosted again, so please be sure to sign up for any additional sessions at strivescan.com/Virginia. And in about a week, you will be able to find this session's recording as well as several others that you may have missed on that same website. Thank you very much, and you guys all have a good night.
Stay safe.
Ladies, have a good night. I'll go ahead and end the session now.